Today we're going to be doing a 125cc motorcycle used buying guide. Now we've done these before with our other bikes, but I thought it was a good idea to do them on the Ninja 125 as arguably they're some of the hardest to buy because they would have lived quite a hard life, and if you haven't done your CBT yet, you won't even be able to test ride it. So in today's video we're going to go over quite a few of the things that you can do, quite a lot of the checks that you can do to make sure this motorcycle is actually a good one. Alright, so the first thing you're going to notice is the cosmetic condition, of course. Walk around the motorcycle, check it out, but expect there to be cracks, dents, scratches. These bikes will probably live a hard life, so it's perfectly normal to see these bikes with some dents or scratches from where the previous owners have dropped them. And remember that you are probably going to drop it yourself as well. So I wouldn't actually recommend that you buy a new 125cc motorcycle if you are starting off riding. I would actually recommend that you buy a used one, because if you drop it, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, expect there to be a few drops. Don't worry about it so much. If it is totally ruined though, that might give you a good hint about how the motorcycle has been treated throughout its life. But most of these bikes wouldn't have been treated all that well, to be perfectly honest with you. And the very first thing that I want you to look at after you've had a look at the cosmetic condition and you're happy with it is actually to check the oil. So if you move, so here's the oil window right here. So if you move the motorcycle over towards you like that, you should see oil in there. All right, check the color of it and just make sure there is actually oil in there. You'd be surprised how many first time riders don't check the oil of their motorcycles. They don't do anything with it, and their bikes end up dying as a result. But as long as it's got oil in it, you should be good to go. And arguably one of the first things you should do when you buy your bike is actually to do an oil change anyway. Alright, so I'm just going to put that out there. We do have videos on how to do that on this particular motorcycle and others if you want to go check those out as well. Alright, so of course one of the other things that you probably want to check first are the brakes. Alright, so let's pick up the motorcycle off the kickstand. We don't have to sit on it to do this. Pick it up, hold on to the front brake and just push it down like that. Alright, make sure that front wheel isn't going anywhere. If it goes forward like this, or the brake lever sinks all the way to the handlebars, then you know you've got a problem there. And you can do the same thing as well with the rear brake, but you've got to sit on the bike. Well, let's see if we can do this actually without sitting on the bike. Let's pick it up off the kickstand. Let's hold on to it and let's see if we can push it forward. And we can't. So the rear brake works as well. Of course, check the condition of the brakes. Make sure the brake lines look good. Alright, if this rubber here is cracked, then they probably need to be changed. And again, not necessarily a deal breaker, but a really good way to get some money off the bike. This is your first motorcycle after all. You were on a budget, so the more money you save, the better. But yeah, just make sure that you check the brake lines. Check that there's brake fluid in here. Now this one is actually looking a little bit orange in there. Now brake fluid .4 is supposed to look a little bit yellowy, but that is looking a little bit dark, so we're probably going to have to change that at some point in the near future. And of course, if your motorcycle has a disc brake on the rear, you can do the same check right here with this brake fluid reservoir for the rear wheel. Now fork seals are one of those things that I have mentioned before in previous videos. I wouldn't necessarily worry about it. To be honest, the fork seals are probably going to last longer than the life of the bike. Anyway, if these bikes make it to 15,000 miles, I'd be surprised. So in terms of mileage, you should be looking anywhere between 5 and 10k. That's a pretty good round number to look for, and you've got plenty of life left. Anything over 15,000 miles on one of these things, you might be pushing your luck a little bit. But that's not to say that it's not a good runner. It might be. If it has been looked after, then you might actually be okay if it's got 15,000 miles. But for 125s, they are built to be cheaper. They are built to be on a budget, so they're not going to be made out of the best materials. The engines aren't going to be the most robust, even on a Kawasaki Ninja 125. Alright, so the next thing then, let's turn the bike on. Let's see how it sounds. So we are talking about 4 strokes here in today's video, not 2 strokes. 2 strokes might be slightly different, but if you are a learner, then 4 strokes are what you're going to be looking at anyway. Alright, now all these lights on the dashboard, don't worry about them just yet. Turn the bike over and let's see if it starts. Pull in the clutch and press the starter. Right, it should start up right away, but then check to make sure that there are no lights on. If there are lights on, you could have a problem. This ABS light on this motorcycle will disappear after you ride it a little bit, so you can ignore the ABS light for the most part. If you get a chance to test ride it, then that's when you can check that. But make sure there's no oil light, make sure there's no engine light or DFI light. If you do have those when the engine starts, you might have a serious issue with the bike, and I'd walk away. If I was perfectly honest with you, I'd walk away from it at that point. If you get an oil light coming up, I'd walk away from it. You don't know how long the motorcycle has been running with not enough oil in it, with less oil than it should have. And as we all know, no oil in bikes, cars, any kind of engine, that's really bad. And yeah, it probably won't last all that long. But whilst you're here, let's give it a rev. Sounds pretty good. If it struggles to start up as well, then that might indicate that you might need to change the battery. Again, not a big deal on these kinds of bikes. Changing out batteries is fairly cheap and quite simple to do for the most part. It's a little bit complicated on this bike because you've got to take off these fairings here, you've got to take off the rear seat, you've got to take off the front seat, and then you've got to take off a few bits inside here to actually access the battery. But older 125s usually tend to have easy battery access. It might just need a charge, but again, it's another thing that you can use to get some money off the bike if it needs a new battery. Yeah, we're sounding pretty good so far. Alright, so let's sit on the bike. So let's put it into gear. I'm going to expect you to know how to put a bike into gear. You shouldn't be buying a motorcycle if you don't know how it works, right? So yeah, check out our video on how to ride a motorcycle, the basics. We do this on the Ninja 125 as well. So let's put it into gear. Now, they might not let you ride it. If that is the case, yeah, it's a bit of a bummer, but you can still do quite a lot of testing here, right? Just make sure the clutch works by doing this. Make sure the bike moves forward. The bike moves forward, you rock it back. Right, it gets into first, back into neutral. Pretty good. Let's see if it goes into second. Now with this, you might not be able to get it into second. I actually managed to get into second that time. Yeah, it's not going in second at the moment, but that's okay because you can just roll the bike forward a little bit and it should go into second. This bike's going to show me up now, isn't it? There we go, it's in second. And you can do the exact same thing again. The bike starts moving forward and you should be alright. Strictly speaking, gearboxes and that on these bikes, again, they should last longer than the life of the motorcycle, so you shouldn't have too many problems. Ideally, alright, if you aren't able to test ride this bike, then you can have someone with you that does have a license or does have a CBT that is able to test ride the bike for you, because that's when you're actually going to get to know the bike fully. You're going to be able to find out if the bike rides okay. But to be honest, if the suspension feels alright, the brakes feel alright, the bike turns over and it runs good, then you should be onto a winner. However, if there is no one with you, with the bike still running, let's go ahead and have a listen to the engine. So we'll go into one of these areas here where there's a nice little piece of open fairing. Let's have a listen. This is how a 125 should sound. If it sounds any different than that, if it sounds like there's some knocking in there, some like really loud bangs going on in there, walk away. That engine is literally on its last legs and it is about to die. But give it a good old listen. On both sides as well. Go around the other side of the motorcycle, give it a good listen. But that is how it should sound. Any odd noises other than that could be engine knock, which means the engine is probably on its last legs. It could mean that the exhaust is blowing. Again, that's not necessarily the end of the world, but it's going to be quite expensive if you're going to replace it. Some garages might be able to weld your exhaust back together. Again, it's a bit of a toss-up there whether or not it's worth it to you or not. I personally, if I'm looking to buy a motorcycle, I don't want to buy a motorcycle with problems. I want to buy a bike that is good to go out the box, Alright, so as soon as you buy it, you can ride it and you can use it as much as you possibly like. And if, I don't know, 6 months to a year down the line you get an issue with it, alright, not a big deal, you've actually be able to get some use out of it before something goes wrong. So don't buy a broken bike, alright, that's one thing that I will say. Even if it seems like a really good deal, it probably isn't, alright. If you end up buying this motorcycle that is potentially on its last legs, or there's an issue with the exhaust, something like that, it is a real risk. Okay, buying used bikes is a risk to begin with, but you can kind of hedge your bets a lot of the time with some really basic checks. Other things that you can look at. Let's turn the bike off for now, because these things aren't going to affect the running of the motorcycle, the quality of the motorcycle, but it's going to be costing you further down the line. So let's check the tyres. Right, these tyres, I know they've got some mud on them, but they've got plenty of tread depth on them. If you see this middle bit here, let's wipe it off with my glove a little bit. Right, if you can see this line here in the middle, right, this bit, if that is all the way down to the bottom, these little lips here, if they're all the way down to the bottom, then that tyre probably needs to be changed soon. On the next MOT, it's going to be a fail. We're going to have a look at the rear tyre as well. So you see again the middle line here, or you can see these lines instead if you want to, right? These kind of cutouts where the tread is. If they are down all the way to the bottom, you can see where they come out here, right? If these are down all the way to the bottom or getting close, then yeah, they probably need to be changed on the next MOT. But if they look like this, well, there's plenty of meat on them, probably about this much before they actually get to the bottom, then you should be good to go again. Those tyres have probably got a good few thousand miles on them at least. Now brakes are a little bit more difficult to check because they're on these calipers. Unless you take the calipers off, you probably won't be able to see how much meat you've got on the brakes pads themselves. But again, you can kind of have an educated guess there with the mileage of the bike. So if you check the mileage of the motorcycle, and if it has any service history and things like that, or MOT history, then it should say on there about when they last changed the brake pads. If they changed the brake pads, say, a few thousand miles ago, then you're probably alright for another few thousand miles. Let's say 6,000 miles, maybe 5,000 miles for a set of brake pads, and then they'll probably need changing. So here we're all there, all right, about 5,000 to 6,000 miles. If the bike has got 3,000 miles on it, then it's probably got some decent brake pads. If it is 5,000 miles, 6,000 miles, and it's never had its brakes done, then yeah, it's probably time to change the brakes at that point. As well, you can check the disc. Make sure the disc isn't bent or warped in any way. If your motorcycle has ABS, this here is the ABS sensor, this cable, and this little disc here on the front, that's what measures the ABS. At least on Kawasaki motorcycles, that's how it measures the ABS. I had, I know, stupidly enough, I've put a tyre on or put the wheel on the wrong way around before, and the ABS system just goes absolutely haywire, the traction control goes absolutely haywire, and it's all because of that little sensor and this disc here. Alright, so this disc should always be on the right hand side of the fork, the right hand fork here. Alright, then you know that it's alright, but yeah, I've done that before. If the bike is really old, check inside the fuel tank as well. Make sure that it's not orange. Right, you might not be able to check because there's fuel in it. If it's had fuel in it consistently, then it's probably clean. But if you see this colour silver here, that's what a fuel tank colour should be. If it is orange or going rusty, then you might have an issue there, because that rust is going to be getting into the fuel system, and that's not good either. So it is worth checking inside the fuel tank, but again, I don't really expect 125s to last any longer than 15,000 miles. When you start getting bikes that are 20 years old, 25 years old or more, that's when things like looking inside the fuel tank become a little bit more important. That is a bit of a risk as well. If you do see that there's rust marks inside the fuel tank, I'd walk away from that personally. There's no escaping the fact that these motorcycles probably live a hard life, alright? To get any kind of power out of these things, you've got to be in the high revs pretty much all the time. So there is going to be an element of, will this motorcycle die on me whilst I own it? The one thing I will say is that if it is a branded motorcycle, if it is a Kawasaki, if it's a Honda, if it's a Yamaha, Suzuki, if it's any of those brands, you should be alright. Even brands like BMW, Aprilia, they've got their, well, BMW, I don't think they have a 125, but Aprilia, yeah, the RS 125. Again, they might not be as good as some of these, right? These are reliable, they're quick, they're good value for money. These Japanese motorcycles, alright? Any of them are pretty damn good. So if you're going to buy any of these, the very first bike that I would look at would be a Japanese one. Then at that point, further on down the line, if you want to buy something bigger, they're always going to be built better. They're more expensive, they're always going to be built better. So at that point, if you want to look at BMWs, if you want to look at Aprilias or any of the other European brands, then that's okay at that point. But when it comes to your first riding experience, you want something that isn't going to let you down. And the Japanese ones, for the most part, shouldn't let you down as long as you've done these checks. Check the mileage as well. Anything over 15,000 miles is probably a no-no. If your budget will allow. Okay, that's another thing. I wouldn't buy any Chinese bikes either. You look at, I think it's Skyjet, Lifan, Lexmoto. What are the Chinese brands out there? There's quite a few. I wouldn't go for a Chinese brand. I've been there, I've done it. They're not that great, alright? Now that's from when I was learning to ride back in, what was it, 2006, 2007, 2008, something like that, when I was riding these kinds of bikes. Not good experience, alright? Every week you're riding it and you're thinking, what else could go wrong with this bike? And even if it's under warranty, alright? If you get one with a warranty, it's probably still going to break down on you. They might have gotten better now, but it's really easy to get tempted by one of these Chinese bikes because they're so cheap. They're cheap for a reason. They are not built very well whatsoever. These motorcycles here are built cheaply, so you can imagine what the Chinese ones are built like. They are built significantly cheaper than these, alright? So I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. Trust me on that, okay? If you can stretch your budget to a Japanese offering, even if it's got more mileage on it, it's probably the better buy. So let's see here now, what kind of motorcycles can you buy for X budget? If you're looking at £1,000, you're probably looking at something like a Honda CBF 125, and you're probably looking at quite an old one, maybe 2010, or maybe even a little bit older than that. They're really good bikes, okay? They have been the staple of 125cc motorcycles here in the UK for decades now. Really reliable platform, very good bike. They are a little bit low on horsepower, all right? They're not the most powerful 125cc that you can buy, but it doesn't matter. They're still really good, really reliable. The look of them isn't great either, all right? They don't look like this. The CBF 125 looks like a traditional universal Japanese bike from like the 70s or something like that. Again, it's your first bike, it doesn't really matter. Between £1,000 and £2,000, again, you're probably going to be looking at older ones. Alright, so older motorcycles, these kinds of bikes that are older, maybe 2016, 2015, something like that. These ones hold their value more than bikes like the CBF 125. If you're looking at between £2,000 and £3,000, then this is where you're going to be looking at bikes like this. The Ninja 125, you're going to be looking at the R125, the Jigsaw 125, and the CBR 125 from Honda, right? And these kinds of bikes as well, they're kind of like the best 125s that you can get. To be honest with you, if you can stretch that far, you're probably onto a good one. All right, all these brands are absolutely fantastic. Let's jump on this motorcycle, and if you have your CBT and you're looking to buy one of these, let's see what you can find out from the motorcycle when you're actually out on a test ride. So let's jump on, let's go. Right, I suppose as we are discussing Chinese motorcycles as well, you will see some people that are like, oh, I never had any problems with mine. That's the problem. They are not built to a standard a lot of the time. You get some that will last you a hell of a long time, they'll do you really well, and you'll get others that won't even last 1,000 miles before you start getting some serious problems with them. Alright, so whilst you're out on the test ride, obviously I'm expecting you to know how to ride a motorcycle. Alright. But let's have a look here. Alright. So you've tested the brakes, so you know they work, so you got confidence in the brakes. Right, here's a good opportunity to test out all the gears. The main thing you're testing out here is all the gears. You're going to go all the way through the range of the bike as well, make sure there's no stutters, hiccups, anything like that. Should be perfectly smooth all the way through the range. Now with these bikes, you don't actually have to go very fast to test out all the gears either. Now, they're supposed to be turning in, yes they are. Right, so first gear. Second gear, pretty good. Third gear. Yeah, pretty good. Fourth gear. Yeah, pretty good. And fifth gear. One of the things you do want to do when you are looking at one of these motorcycles is to run it until operating temperature. Because then that's how you're going to know whether or not the motorcycle is actually good or not. There are lots of things you can hide if the motorcycle has already been ridden, so it's warmed up, or it hasn't been ridden in a while. Okay, so I suppose when you are checking out a motorcycle as well, a used one, you should always check it from cold. Always make sure that it's a cold start when you do, because again, a motorcycle, especially a more modern one, should start up straight away. Shouldn't have any problems. If it's a carbureted one, then of course you're going to have to use the choke. But as soon as you pull that choke back, the motorcycle should kick into life immediately. And it should be able to run at idle as well. So if it's got a manual choke, you take off the choke after it's been running for a few seconds. Alright, and it should idle on its own. It should idle well on its own. If it doesn't, then that engine might have problems. Okay, I'm pretty sure that engine's probably going to have problems. If it doesn't idle on its own, walk away. It'll be a total hassle for you, I promise. Right, but we've gone all the way through the gears. We're 40 miles an hour and we're all the way through the gears. We're at 6th gear. And yeah, the motorcycle drives as it should. The motorcycle sounds the way it's supposed to. There's no lights on the dashboard. Check the indicators as well, I suppose. Alright, check the brake lights. If you're going to be looking at one of these motorcycles, of course you want it to have an MOT. Again, just makes it easier. Don't buy a bike without an MOT. There'll be things that you'll have to do to it 100%. Alright, you'll get sellers saying like, oh, it'll fly through its MOT. It doesn't have an MOT, but it'll fly through. Bullshit. A total BS. It won't. There'll be things you'll have to change, whether it's tyres, whether it's brake pads, something. There'll be something that you'll have to change, something you'll have to fix before it is roadworthy, or lights even. There'll be something. So check all that. Alright, of course, if you're buying it from a dealership, then all that stuff should work, alright? But again, it's still worth checking regardless, just for peace of mind. And at least you know that at least for the first year, you won't have any problems with the bike. Alright, you shouldn't have any major problems with the bike anyway. Right, which way do we want to go? I think I want to go right. But there you have it, everyone. That is how you buy a 125cc motorcycle. Again, arguably some of the hardest bikes that you will ever buy in your life, because learners don't know what they're doing on motorcycles, and sometimes they might end up doing something to the bike that could harm it in future. For future owners, you just never know. It is a gamble. Whenever you're buying any used motorcycle, it is a bit of a gamble. But 125s in particular, because they live very short lives, most of them, and they live very hard lives, it's tough. But if you are looking to buy right now and you don't have the budget for a motorcycle that I've recommended or anything like that, then save up for a little bit longer. Yeah, a few months more and you should be able to afford it. Of course, if you work as well, if you've got a steady job, then you'll be able to buy it on finance as well. That's another option potentially if you want to. But yeah, just save your pennies a little bit more for something that is a little bit better. You don't have to spend a fortune, alright? I'm a penny pincher. I like to save my money wherever I can. But you've got to be able to buy value for money. You've got to buy the good stuff. If you buy the good stuff, it won't let you down. But you got to know what the good stuff is. And hopefully today's video has given you a rough idea or a good idea of what good stuff looks like when you're looking to buy a motorcycle, what a good one looks like. So thank you ever so much for watching this one all the way to the end. If you have learned anything from this video, leave a like. Let's see if we can get this one to 200 likes. 200 likes, please, 200 likes. If you've enjoyed this one, leave a like. Let me know down in the comment section below if there's anything that I've missed, if there's anything else that you would check personally. If you were looking to buy a motorcycle like this, a 125cc motorcycle, let me know down in the comment section below. I'm sure it's going to be a real help to anyone else out there that's looking to buy one of these motorcycles. But anyway, thanks again, take care, ride safe, and we will catch you all in the next video. Have a good one.